Mr. Jim Morrison, Backdoor Man. And when Jim says he's a backdoor man, I believe him. This is Hexes and Soldiers, episode 10. My name is Jason, and welcome back. 9 episodes ago, I started this thing. Just ran with it, never looked back. And since then, I may have admittedly peeked my head over my shoulder a couple of times. But still, for the most part, I am running forward with this and plan to do so for quite some time. As far as shout-outs go, I'll just say the usual. Hey to everybody that has subscribed, and once again ask that anybody that hasn't, join the bandwagon, start your subscription, and you will receive nothing other than my gratification. And I would like to give a particular shout out to let's just call him John, and let's just happen to say he's from, say, I don't know, Florida. And I ordered a game from John. Highway to the Reich had yet to manifest the counters. Receive an email from him saying that he has found one of these counters, put it in an envelope, and sent it snail mail to me, which I found very cool. And I thank you for that, John. In fact, received his located counter, and a letter was enclosed which states thus: I found this counter from Highway to the Reich under my desk. It must have slipped out of the game box when I was packing the components for eBay. So thank you, John, and fascinating story. I don't know how long that counter was under the desk, hopefully not too long, and had you not found it, it's hard to say just how long that counter would have had to survive under the desk, and not sure how supply is to your desk area. Perhaps that counter had been isolated. Obviously it couldn't break out, otherwise it would not remain under the desk unless, I don't know, maybe it was strategically imperative that they stay under the desk. And regardless, glad you found it. Thanks for sending it. And so yeah, and news and reviews. Saw a little thing, and you may have as well, if not seen, at least heard about this little thing. And it looks like at some point in the not too distant future, when you order something from, at least initially, Amazon.com, and most likely with similar retailers, you may very well receive your item via drone delivery. And they have a little video up, maybe 45 seconds, promoting this, and it shows the process involved from order inception to drone delivery, and that is quite intriguing. I hope MMP has seen this and plans to do the same. And I'm sure they have tons of money to work with to do this. But how cool would that be? To order a game from MMP and have it delivered via drone and dropped off on your doorstep. That would be quite something. Regarding MMP, from them to me to you, I would like to say if you haven't signed up for their newsletter, to do so. And they have unveiled the cover for the Winter Offensive bonus pack number 5, and yeah, kudos. No complaints. In fact, was very excited to see the new cover, and I really like where they're going with their graphic art and illustrations. I tip my hat to them for that. Lincoln's War, which was MMP's first Kickstarter game. I assume all of you have received that who ordered it and are enjoying it thoroughly. Um, let's see. In the past, I've talked about another podcast, Guns, Dice, and Butter, and that is put on by a gentleman who designed Triumph of Chaos. And I have whined and complained and carried on for months now regarding the lack thereof of a new episode. Well, I can cry no more. Episode 18 of Guns, Dice, and Butter is up and running. For those of you who are fans, that is something to rejoice about. And for those of you who have no idea what this is, well, now is your opportunity to go to Guns, Dice, and Butter and start with episode 1. Most notably, I would say regarding these podcasts, the gems are interviews that he conducts with various designers and people in the industry, and does a very good job with that. And I want to say thanks as well, Doctor, for your shows. Much appreciated. GMT Dark Valley by Ted Rasier, 1914 Offensive Ultras, and C3I Magazine issue 27 should all be in your hands. And also Empire of the Macedonian and Punic Wars 350 to 150 BC for all you Ancients fans. A reprint by Philip Sabin, and that is the Philip Sabin of other games as well, but probably more known for a couple of books he's written. And if anybody hasn't picked any of that up, well, I recommend it. Chris Harding Simulations has a Battle for Gettysburg: The First Day out, and encourage everybody to look at that. Also, and this is from Consim World, Grogheads. Is anybody familiar with that? Am I the only one that's not? Well, I am now, but 2014 Grogheads Reader's Choice Awards voting is in full swing. Grogheads is holding their annual Reader's Choice Award voting based on nominations submitted throughout the year. Areas include both tabletop and digital games, and there are consolidated overall votes as individual categories. They encourage you to weigh in and have your voice heard, and don't forget to nominate your favorites of 2014 as the year goes by. Also, there's a very well written article by Carl Nolte regarding yet another hobby store biting the dust, and I have seen this where I live as well. Here in the nerve center of Hexes and Soldiers, Columbia, Missouri, when I moved here, there was a typical hobby store, and I college student still could go in there and just be my eyes would glaze over with all the stuff in there. And in fact, I had just moved here, and that was where I picked up in the shrink on the shelf Solitaire ASL, and about fainted when I saw it there. I assume it had been there for a while. It was in kind of a corner of the store, dusty, and it looked like things they didn't know what to do with or how to categorize, and it was lumped in there. And boy, that was a hell of a find. Made my year. And yeah, among other things. So, but yeah, that's gone. And the old hobby store in St. Louis, where I grew up, Checkered Flag in South County, was born and raised in that store, fed and watered there when it comes to games and models and things. And my lord, I think between, especially my brother, we probably single-handedly kept them in business a lot longer than they would have otherwise been in business. They carried the full line of Avalon Hill stuff, Victory Games stuff, and can't remember if they had SPI stuff or not. I don't see why they didn't. But once a week at least in there picking stuff up. Yeah, well that's gone. So the hobby store, there's this thing called the internet, and unfortunately, it's sometimes cheaper and well, more convenient for people, I guess. But the hobby store, it wasn't just a place you go and buy stuff and leave. I mean, this was a place where like-minded individuals converged and talked about their passion, be it history or modeling hobby or yeah games. It was kind of like the way the beauty shop is for women. This is like a man's beauty shop. You kind of hang out there and gossip and shoot the shit, but it's a dying era, and that's kind of sad to see it going by the wayside. But all things come to pass, I guess, unfortunately, in some cases. And then Consum World donations are being accepted, and I guess Consum World operates via donations. You can donate $10, which is known as their silver level, and receive one free print and play game plus publisher direct specials to help you recoup your entire donation. And then if you donate 25 bucks or more, which is the gold level, you get 5 free print and play games plus the same publisher direct discounts with even greater savings to help you recoup your entire donation. So, as far as the recoup thing with publishers, looks like Console World has teamed up with numerous game publishers so that you may get a little kickback for your donation, and thank you to them for that. After action reports, and when it comes to stuff that I've been gaming, I guess is where I should break into the subject. Reverted a bit and did a lot of Commands and Colors Napoleonic stuff. In fact, received the recently released Austrian Army expansion, and wasn't enough for me just to receive that and play it. Had to purchase yet another particular kind of Risk game, and this would be the Risk game that has the, well, Napoleonic-esque looking little figures in it, and didn't have enough to field another entire army, so I had to get that, and painted them the prerequisite white color, based them, and I had a ball. There are pictures of that up actually on my channel. You can take a look at. I've got a battle from the Russian expansion and a battle from the Austrian expansion, and of course I have cut out little hexes and things, and quite an elaborate little undertaking, but in the end, glad I did it, and a more than pleasing to the eye, in my opinion. So there's that. Also got a lot of stuff on order, and that's probably a bad thing in my case because I need to be saving money. But have sold 3 total games on eBay to help pay for this, and these would be the Avalon Hill American Civil War series games. I've still got 3 of them, and these would be the Stonewall titled games, but let 3 of them go, and it doesn't break my heart necessarily because the Civil War, no offense, as interesting that it is, just ain't my shtick. Though much respect to those who live and breathe the Civil War and have gamed that for years. Keep it going. Let's see. Regarding the stuff on order, I have received Monty's Gamble, which, for the love of God, the cover of that game has probably some of the worst illustration, art, graphic, whatever you want to call it, that I have seen when it comes to a game. And fantastic game. I mean, for Jesus, it's just wonderful. But when you look at the thing, I wonder how many people saw this and ran screaming and have no idea. Just get through the box lid and you're home free. The stuff inside is just wonderful. And then the Ardennes Offensive, the old SPI flat tray game, showed up, and I'm gonna delve into a bit of the old SPI heyday and wax nostalgic and all that fun, wonderful stuff. I've also got the Winter War flat tray showing up, and then the SPI's Arnhem game from the Quad series they released, and the designer box designer edition of that showing up tomorrow. And then I have to stop myself from accumulating anything else because I've got games that are mocking me because I haven't played them, and they deserve to be played. So, no Velveteen Rabbit syndrome here. I plan to give equal and loving attention to all the games that reside here with me, and so there's that. And then I also might add that in one of the scenarios for the Austrian Commands and Colors Napoleonics game, the final scenario, and the designer always says you can change history. Well, I think I changed history because the Austrians won this thing, and the French just were flat out annihilated. And historically speaking, I'm pretty sure it was the other way around. And it's kind of odd to see that, but I don't see how the French could even come close when it comes to this game. So maybe we're having some historical issues when it comes to these things. And that doesn't surprise me. These games aren't produced for their historical simulation. They're produced for more of a game aspect. And if it just so happens to coincide with history, that's probably a better way to describe it. So, that said, I have for you a top 10 list and decided to forego yet again the list that could have been compiled via the Geek. But these would be my top 10 wargame designers, and I base this list on a number of games owned by a designer, and I feel confident in doing that because obviously I like the game or I wouldn't have it, and this reflects positively on the game's designer. So I'll start below the bottom, just below number 10, and say that Vance von Voorhees, John Hill, John Butterfield, and John Edwards are all kind of tied. So then we'll jump to number 10, and I'll say that I have Richard Hamblin, who even for me doesn't immediately ring a bell, but the titles do. And when it comes to Mr. Hamblin, he is the designer of Bull Run, Victory in the Pacific, Fortress Europa, and Gunslinger, all titles that I have played and enjoyed. And then number 9, or rather number 8, sorry, Adam Starkweather, a name that should have more of a ring of familiarity to it. At least it does with me. And I believe Mr. Starkweather, Victory Denied, of course, The Devil's Cauldron, Where Eagles Dare, and Red Star Rising. Now, some of these he merely further developed. I think the original design perhaps may have been Gentleman from Japan, but Starkweather has a very promising career ahead of him. A young man with stuff under his belt that is destined for, if there was to be a museum or a Wargame Hall of Fame, would most likely find its way in there. And looking forward to future releases by him. Number 7, Mark Herman. And when it comes to Mr. Herman, we have Gulf Strike, Pacific War, Alien Strike, France 1944, The Allied Crusade in Europe, and of course Empire of the Sun. Mark Herman there. It's number 6 on my list of top 10 wargame designers would be Courtney F. Allen, and Courtney F. Allen would be of upfront fame, and in addition to that, the expansion Bonsai. Also a tax sub, a Thunder at Casino, and Storm over Arnhem. And of course, Storm over Arnhem, the seminal cornerstone of area movement games, out of which only more area movement games came. And thank him for that, because that area movement stuff is just fantastic. Then we have number 5, S. Craig Taylor, and this would be the designer of Flat Top, Firepower, Napoleon's Battles, Dauntless, Air Force, Wooden Ships and Iron Men, very old game, and Attack Air. So S. Craig Taylor with some good stuff. And then number 4, Mark Simonich, a name that most people will probably be familiar with. Mark Simonich has France 40, the Caucasus Campaign, Ardennes 44, Normandy 44, and Ukraine 43. So GMT's golden boy, Mark Simonich. And number 3, Mr. Dunnigan, seminal figure in the building and creative history of the industry. Mr. Dunnigan, among other things, designer of War in the East, Sniper, the Ardennes Offensive, the Game of France 1940, German Blitzkrieg in the West, Panzer Group Guderian, which I will get into more later regarding that game and more that game system, and Panzer Army Africa. So that's James Dunnigan, number 3. Number 2, Joseph Balkowski. And Joseph Balkowski, designer of Stonewall Jackson's Way, Stonewall in the Valley, the Korean War, Lee vs. Grant, Atlantic Wall, 2nd Fleet, 6th Fleet, 7th Fleet, and Operation Typhoon. And finally, number 1, I'll give you a second to take a guess. And any last final bets to be placed? Okay, that's it. Dean Essig, number 1. And ton of games that he's designed, but really perhaps it's an unfair acknowledgement, because when you design a system, it's easier to design more games for that system, and as opposed to designing completely new and different games. But with Dean Essig, you've got, at least I have, It Never Snows, Bastogne, Screaming Eagles Under Siege, The Blitzkrieg Legend, Battle for France 1940, Case Blue, Hube's Pocket, Guderian's Blitzkrieg 2, Grossdeutschland 42, The Mighty Endeavor, Frozen Hell, Black Wednesday, DAC 2, Stalingrad Pocket, Baltic Gap, and on and on and on. But Dean Essig, the kingpin of game design, and let's hope that he continues to provide us with just nothing but more and more wonderful games. And then I have also, as a side note, I didn't know this, but a gentleman named James Goff designed a game a couple of you might be familiar with, and this game being Winter War. You can get that SPI flat pack, and I think it was in Strategy and Tactics as well at one point. But this would be the only design by him to see store shelves before he succumbed to blindness. And this is a tragic story, but certainly rings of familiarity, because there was a gentleman named Jorge Luis Borges from Argentina, I believe, who was a very prolific writer and famous, very well known. And if any of you have not read any of Borges' his work, his fiction, especially his short stories, are well worth reading, especially the library. I think it's called the Library of Babel. And basically it is a short story describing an infinite library. Very cool stuff. And so yeah, also a tragedy, because he as well succumbed to blindness. And I think he was towards the end of his career, but yeah, well, you can't write anymore. And I think he was even working at a library when this happened. But two tragic but somewhat similar stories. And then the meat, let's say half the meat of the matter, rather. There's different angles to approach this, but I'll say, first of all, one of the things that I won't be able to mention that I want to mention is an interview I did, an impromptu kind of off the cuff interview with Chris from Online, and this is the founder and owner of NWS. And if those of you out there don't know yet, NWS Online is a wonderful place to get games from because they are affordable and available. And as well, he is a wargamer, so he knows his customers because he games himself. But I thought, having read a few threads on the Geek and got a little more curious with each thing I read, I kind of thought, who is this Chris guy? He says he's a wargamer. He's been doing this thing for oh, 13 years or something like that. Sorry, Chris, if I got that wrong. So I gave him a call and I says, hey, I'm so and so, and of course I didn't expect him to have any idea who I am. Doesn't matter. And said, would he be interested in doing kind of an interview to let people out there know a little bit more about him? He says he's into the hobby like we are, and just kind of curious as to how he got into the hobby and his background, and maybe he could shed some light on what it's like to be on the other side of the game board, and that is to say, working with publishers, etc., etc. And he seemed reluctant to do that. I suppose I understand. So I kind of put the idea in the back of my head, but then he proceeded to go on and on and on about the things that I wanted to know. And the man is very knowledgeable, has a lot to say about a lot of things. Big historian, big World War II buff. And, when I called him, I thought, he's obviously going to be busy. I'll keep this brief, just ask him. And by the end of the conversation, it was me who ended up having to cut conversation short. So I scrambled to write down, while it was still fresh in my mind, some key points that I remembered, and kind of fleshed them out. And a few days go by, and I call him back, and I've got kind of an outline done, and I wanted to get his approval before I shared anything he had to say with you guys. And I read what I had, and I think he got kind of a kick out of it. But when it was all said and done, and I came to agree, we just decided to shelve it. And so this interview, which is done and ready to go, was sitting in the back of a drawer. Probably never see the light of day. And the reason for that is such. It's very difficult, and this is how I understand it. It's very difficult to be able to say what you want to say and be sincere about it without stepping on toes, being that he is a retailer. And like I said, he has a lot to say about a lot of things. But I understand he doesn't want to risk creating any enemies or starting any wars or setting fire to certain things. And so I'll leave it at that. And it's unfortunate because, like I say, the man is an interesting man uh, and has a ton of stuff to say regarding publishers and retailers and the experience that he has with that. And the second conversation I had with him actually geared more towards the historical, and I had a lot of fun with that. But I will say this, and hopefully I won't upset him. I will share this one thing with you. His very first war game, he told me, was War at Sea, which is very cool because I still have my copy of that thing. It's an ancient copy. My brother had that, and great game. But yeah, very cool to hear that. And it's a shame. Maybe someday he will feel comfortable with, or be in the position to say what he wants to say and get all this stuff off his chest. But also, I want to say that if you haven't caught wind of this yet, he is in the process of moving the NWS online store to eBay, if I have that right. And if you go to eBay, you will see, just type in, I think you can find it through NWS. He still uses that. But he's moving all the inventory to eBay. And I noticed for the most part that most, if not all, of these things are free shipping. So check that out. And thanks, Chris, for your time. And yeah, I'm sorry that we couldn't do what I wanted to do. But again, just being able to talk to you was cool. And Chris is just a guy. And, when you call NWS, you aren't going to get a voicemail and you aren't going to get an operator. You're going to get the man himself. And if you are up to it and brave enough or curious enough, throw out a subject, and I'm sure he'll have something to say about it. And the guy is very knowledgeable when it comes to history, and like I say, especially World War II. So thanks, Chris, for all your time, and keep up the good work. So that's not what I can talk about, unfortunately, but I can talk about another interview with a specific game designer, and this will tie back into my top 10 designers, of which he was not a part of. And it is not because I don't like him or because I don't want anything to do with the games that he's put out, but in fact, I've wanted very badly to obtain some of his games, some more easily obtained than others, especially when it comes to price tag. I would come close to killing to get my hands on the Corson Pocket, but Mr. Jack Rade is of whom I speak. And of those of you out there that have or have played the Corson Pocket, that is his, how do I put it, his love child, his greatest, his magnum opus, if you will. There you go. And I would love to play it, but have yet to do so at some point. And this is one of my Grail games, and there's the kind of weird excitement in the search, or the I'll get it at some point, but the wanting to attain it creates some kind of weird, sick excitement, and I want to prolong that a little longer before I get it, because like I said, that is, I am proud and happy to say, one of the few final Grail games that I have yet to obtain. So I keep dancing around it, and it is available, but it isn't cheap, and sometime I'll own it. But anyway, Jack Rade started his own game company, People's Wargames, and back in the day, and most recently is author and co-author of a number of books regarding World War II and especially the Eastern Front. The guy's an authority on the Eastern Front, and even does lectures from what I understand. But his first war game was Corson Pocket, and for those of you unfamiliar with that, just hit the Geek Up and you will find anything and everything you want to know about that game. But apparently I was trying to do some research on him because personally I have an affinity for him, and there are a number of reasons for this. But he's not your average, he's not of your average war game mold, if that makes any sense. Found an interview in An Old Fire and Movement by Friedrich Helfrich, and Jack Rade is interviewed, and I've broken this down to the best of my ability so that I don't just succumb to reading it verbatim and having listeners drop out and just watch cats race up curtains and things like that, which is fun to watch, but I'm hoping you'll stick around and listen. Um, he graduated high school in California back in '64 and became a bodyguard for a member of the CPUSA, which is a Communist Party, known political activist, and some could argue that his games are vehicles for political commentary, so to speak. And having grown up in Chicago's Hyde Park, where he says a 4-block walk in either direction could land you in luxury or poverty, admits he was most influenced by the civil rights movement and the Cuban Revolution, both examples of the determination of peoples affecting change. Now, he attends Berkeley on an AFL-CIO scholarship, but doesn't seem to do much with that. And this is in 64. Probably his standout memory from that time is being arrested in Sproul Hall sit-in, and an active Vietnam War protester. Anyway, as far as wargaming goes, he had seen Tactics 2 and Gettysburg for sale at the Museum of Science and Industry, and got into game design through the habit of tweaking and modifying games that he already had, which is a habit I have of it's very hard for me to simply sit down, read the rules, and play a game the way it's supposed to be played. I tend to almost immediately want to change something or modify something, and this just has to do with my approach to things. I'm more of a tinkerer, and I've tried my hand at a number of design improvements and original designs, all to no avail, at least as of yet, but know where he's coming from. And says he got into the game design through the habit of, like I said, tweaking and modifying already published games, such as Drang nach Osten, a game in particular that he mentions. Once People's War Games gets rolling, his wife, of all people, actually handles the artwork. And Corson Pocket was printed and die cut, he says, in union shops, and I'm sure he probably went out of his way to ensure that happened. At one point in this article, an interviewer asks him if he agrees with the tenet that the historian and the designer should view his work dispassionately, to which he states, as Karl Marx said, philosophers have only interpreted the world. The point is to change it. Anyone who studies the Second World War and fails to draw passionate conclusions about fascism is lacking, to me, in both humanity and his understanding of his own self-interest. Unfortunately, a great part of our hobby hides an incredible anti-communist bias. And you have to remember this is still at a time when the Soviet Union is the axis of evil, and potential conflict could erupt at any time. That is obviously not the case now. Anyway, an incredible anti-communist bias behind a thin mask of dispassion. I would prefer the general tenet that the historian or game designer should search for truth without bias, not without passion, and that is very well spoken. Now, in Corson Pocket, Jack Rade dedicates the game, interestingly enough, to the men and women of the Red Army. And a lot of people, and including myself, might find that odd. It seems that he is affiliating himself with a particular side and kind of going out on a limb to demonstrate that. Now, he says that in this game, he is not biased toward the Russians, though he wants to give them their proper due, and I'll get into more of that later. But in a lot of games, he feels that they've been given short shrift, and the Germans continue to be the main point of focus as far as perspective and design and game mechanic. So the interview then goes on to compare what he did with his dedication to a game called Sharpsburg by Command Perspectives. And in this game, there's a dedication along the lines of to the gallant men of both sides. And apparently this caused kind of a stir. There are a lot of people that will not be happy to hear this dedication, as there is a lot of suspect element when it comes to morality in the South, especially obviously when it comes to slavery. But anyway, he disagrees with that dedication and says, in comparison to his, that by that reasoning he should have also dedicated his game to the Viking SS. And that's kind of interesting. He goes on to talk about design problems, specifically fine-tuning the offensive within the game, and he says he has trouble tuning it so that it's neither too strong or too weak, and then says he has some problems with supply, as I expect most designers do if they care about what they're designing, as that is a big factor, and you want to present it in a way that it doesn't overshadow things, and He stated that the history behind the event was used to clear up any design issues that popped up, and stresses the ability of war games to demonstrate historical reality in general, and the Red Army in particular. Goes on to say that many games are designed from the German perspective alone, and still are, and I suppose that's not a big problem if you balance it out with other things. But he cites back in the day SPI's drive on Stalingrad, where the Soviets' only course of action is flight, and absolutely detests SPI's version of Coruscant. Apparently, they have a version of their own. And the subject of the industry being seemingly dominated by right wing militants came up. And as I said, he is not of your typical perceived, at least, wargamer mold. And I think when most people even mention the fact that they play wargamers or label themselves as wargamers, drum up images of seething right wing, militant, bloodthirsty, conservative, closed minded individuals. And while that may be true in some cases, it is certainly not true across the board. So Jack states that though the elements exist with German bias flourishing on box art and in titles, and you can contrast this to a contemporary thing when you look at M&P's Victory Denied and Victory Lost, and even Red Star Rising. This stuff is about as Russian as you can get. I mean, I don't even think there's a German anything anywhere on the cover. It is just flags and statue with a raised arm, or Russians running triumphantly across the box. But direct contrast to what he saw as German bias back in the day. He believes that the issue of war and peace is the most important issue facing us, and is critical of the government's use of wargaming to further its aims, citing at the time the potential for intervention and a grab for oil in the Middle East. And says that if our next president rolls an exchange, referring to a combat results table in a game, on some landing beach in the Arab Persian Gulf, there won't be any game designers put into aluminum boxes to be shipped home. And that in itself is intriguing. Um, a lot of times, in fact, most of the time, we forget that these cardboard counters we push around, even though they aren't born and breathed and bled and buried, the actual real individuals they represent uh, did. They did breathe and they did bleed, and a lot of them were buried. And I'm not saying you have to constantly bear that in mind, but maybe just an occasional reflection on an odd fact that a form of entertainment in which we are engaging comes at the expense of a very tragic historical event. Nevertheless, for Jack, it's the facts that should be drawn from history. And unfortunately, when it comes to the Soviet Union, for him, this tends to be the exception rather than the rule. And he concludes by saying history should be respected, and one shouldn't play fast and loose with reality in order to model one's own prejudices. So the interview, in conclusion, brings up a good question and says, what about the Soviet Union's entrance into Afghanistan? And at the time of this article, it appears the Soviet Union was intervening, and one might say invading Afghanistan. And has this affected his faith? Because he seems to be a big proponent of the Soviet Union and its philosophy. And Jack says no. He says, I think the Soviets have helped Afghanistan preserve its young and fragile revolution from the threats of both religious counter-revolution with generous support from the CIA and China. And as it turns out, he's right. We did support, at least as the CIA, we did support highly the Mujahideen freedom fighters in Afghanistan, trained them, supplied them with arms, and in a cruel twist of fate, these are the same people that we came to fight later on ourselves. He says this would almost certainly have led to a situation like those we have seen in Chile, Indonesia, Guatemala, or Zaire, with a potential Pol Pot in power in the person of the deposed Hafizullah Amin. Clearly, had the left been stronger in Afghanistan, this situation would not have arisen. But in a bad situation, I believe the Soviets acted responsibly, and I'm not saying I agree with anything Mr. Jack Rade says or believes, but I do find it interesting, and I do find myself, admittedly, agreeing with a few things. So, um, he goes on to criticize SPI for no longer being progressive and flat out irresponsible, while he considers Game Designers Workshop as pretty good. Interestingly, he calls out Fire Movement as rightly being criticized for its overabundance of its portrayal when it comes to the German army. And finally, in conclusion, he applauds Fire Movement for its allowance of free discussion, which I guess he's getting to the fact that even though he has some criticisms, the fact that they would interview him and allow him to say the stuff he's saying is to be applauded. So that's that, and I'll bring that up because yeah, there's going to be people out there who believe things or say things that you don't agree with, but nonetheless, as is Jack Rade, we are among the same fold, and that we are all involved in this war game thing, though we may not all share the same philosophies. In fact, another interesting individual who I think it's overlooked or a lot of people don't know about is a gentleman named Guy Debord, and he was a French individual um, that lived in France during that tumultuous time when the streets were filled with protesters, not only students but trade unions. They had both joined forces and were expressing to the max their dissatisfaction with how things were going and where they saw things going. And a seminal instrument in that movement was the Situationist International, and that's a whole other story. But the Situationists were mostly students who had a particular philosophy that involved, among other things, basically completely modifying one's whole outlook and philosophy when it comes to modern day contemporary things. And they believe that art, and that, trust me, they have a wide ranging definition of art, but they believe that art should coincide with everyday life, and life should coincide with art. But anyway, Guy Debord, he designed this game, and it is a game that consists of squares like a chessboard, but a ton of them. I think maybe well over 100 squares, and a couple of little mountain ranges, uh, some various units. But the interesting thing with his game was he bore in mind the importance of lines of communication, and this can be interpreted as supply or being able to deliver orders. The game didn't attempt to depict any particular historical conflict. It was more of a generic overview of conflict. And he did quite well with it. In fact, did so well that he was worried because he was more, he was a philosopher, wrote a couple of treatises, one being The Society of the Spectacle, which is a very well thought out and deep assault on commodity culture and the way people buy things, the extent to which the way that buying things is affecting and changing people's lives such that it's almost uh, out of their control. Anyway, he develops this game, and he's worried that the game will, after his passing, gain more popularity than the things he wrote about or the things he was recorded as saying. And I don't know that that became the case. In fact, I don't think that it did. But he does have quite a big following, and there are also uh, there's also a sizable following of this game, and I believe it's called The Art of War. Anyway, very interesting game, and just another example of somebody who, again, is not what perhaps somebody might personify a wargamer as being. Um, this is an individual who, again, he was a revolutionary. He was a philosopher. I don't think he had ever been in the military, and again, yeah, just not of the typical what you would consider wargamer mold. And I find that interesting. It's such a vast array of individuals that comprise this community, which I think only stands to make the hobby, or as I call it, industry, stronger. Move right along to the latter half of the meat of the matter, and which will be a little more focused and relate a little bit better to game stuff. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the evolution of a system and call this Wargame Design from Infancy to Adult, SPI style. And I'll start with Kursk. This game was birthed in 1971, and it's from this game that a number of other games came out, but this was the seminal system, the initial game system that kicked everything off. From this you get Moscow Campaign in 72, which is the first attempt at overrun combat occurs in this game. Turning Point, the Battle of Stalingrad, also 1972, and then the Ardennes Offensive in 1973 comes out with a thing called Sticky Zones of Control. War in the East in 1974 then introduces a more sophisticated treatment of overrun as a function of movement. So, beginning with Kursk and kind of developing through these games comes a system which is the, in my opinion, system still used today. And ladies and gentlemen, I introduce Panzer Group Guderian, 1976, operational combat, scale, and it's this system that is just a gold mine is struck here. And in Panzer Group Guderian, among other things, you have two opposing armies, and the player turn sequences associated with those two armies are asymmetrical. And all Red Army combat units begin the game, and here's the most interesting thing probably, in my opinion. All Red Army combat units begin the game untried. So when I say untried, it means you don't know their strength initially. And there are important differences in the supply requirements of both sides. For the Soviets, supply is headquarters based, whereas for the Germans it's not. And there's no Russian mechanized movement phase. So when it comes to Panzer Group Guderian regarding the phases, turn phases you have, you begin with a movement phase, then a combat phase, a disruption removal phase, a Soviet air interdiction phase, and the German player turn then proceeds with an initial movement phase, combat phase, mechanized movement phase, disruption removal phase, and their own air interdiction phase. So there's that, and then you have combat, of course, which can be conducted normally or with overruns. And when it comes to overruns, unlike earlier titles, which used overrun combat as an integral part of their game systems, but required a ton of odds for success, an overwhelming amount. In this system, in the Panzer Group Guderian system, overruns do not require particularly large strength differentials to be effective. So potentially, and here's the rub, German mechanized units could attack during the initial movement phase, again during the combat phase, and yet again during the mechanized movement phase. So, regarding the combat results table, it reads as such: you basically need 6-to-1 odds or greater before a defender eliminated result pops up. And the supply rules impose very different requirements on the two sides. See, German units are in supply if they're able to trace a supply path of 20 or fewer movement points, not hexes, either from the west edge of the map or from an unblocked road that connects to the western map edge. So Soviet combat units must trace their supply path to an undisrupted leader or headquarters unit that is then able to trace an unblocked line of communication of any length to the east edge of the map. Russian leader units may coordinate supply for any number of friendly units, but all supplied units must be within range determined by each leader's rating of the coordinating leader. All units of both sides are considered to be in supply on the game turn they first enter the map, and supply effects are identical for both sides. Unsupplied units are halved with fractions rounded down for both movement and combat. Zone of controls, however, are unaffected. So the Panzer Group Guderian system then spawns a ton of games, and but not only games. Out of the Panzer Group Guderian system comes another system, and this would be the Wacham Rhine system, which is grand tactical scale, and of course used in the Wacham Rhine game. So, and then from that you get another number of other games, but you have Jack Rade's Course and Pocket. One could say is a direct evolution of the Wacham Rhine version of the Panzer Group Guderian system. And as far as contemporary stuff, you can look at a victory lost and a victory denied. Both have visible, though maybe faded, visible ties to the Panzer Group Guderian system. So there's that, and I just thought that was interesting that this game system started back in '76 is still inherent within games today. I don't know that the Panzer Group Guderian system was expected to be so seminal in its development, but it certainly has proven to be just that. What else? We've got, I have down the ever-increasing oddity of the dice and superstition, and I wonder, this is more of a question to you guys than an offering by me, and I wonder if there's anything, and you have an opportunity to share this information underneath this video. Is there anything in particular that you guys do superstition wise to your dice to get the rolls you want? And that should be self-explanatory. I myself, I don't think I have any traditions. If I keep getting bad dice rolls, I will switch them out. And I've heard of people, I think I talked about this before. I've heard of one guy he has gone so far as to put his dice in the freezer until they freeze, then take them outside on the street and smack them with a hammer so that they shatter and just explode everywhere. And I guess the satisfaction of that occurring is enough to inspire him to hold his head up and game with renewed vigor and confidence. Sure, there's plenty of other crazy things, but if you guys have anything, I'd be curious to hear about them. It could prove to be entertaining. Things you have done to your dice as a result of bad dice rolls, or things that you do superstition-wise to get better dice rolls. And then I think that proves to be it. And in retrospect, don't know how well this episode will be received. It seems like I'm hitting and missing here and there as far as response, but this might be on the fence. Either way, as far as future shows go, the same. I don't know. I usually don't know maybe until about a day before exactly what I'm going to focus on. I have a number of running ideas that I have floating around in my head, and it's just a matter of my interest at that moment, or maybe something I see sparks a particular direction. But as far as next episode, I'll be honest with you, no idea. Definitely plan to focus more on some after action reports, but with this move to New Orleans, don't know how much time I'll have. And with that said, the next episode will most likely be delayed, but fear not, an episode will appear at some point, like magic. So with that, I hope you guys have at least enjoyed something out of this episode. And what's that saying? You can't please all the people all the time. But I'm trying to please most of the people most of the time, and you can't fault me for that. So, as usual, thanks for listening. Keep gaming, and let's go Blues. That's it. You go in the freezer.